If you own a small business, let me ask you a question. What's your biggest risk that's facing your business right now? Could be a fire. Could it be an employee getting hurt? Could it be your only employee getting hurt? Could it be a lawsuit? Could it be a cyber attack, a motor vehicle accident, losing your customers, losing a major one, maybe even your only one? See, the interesting thing is, after spending years looking at business from a risk management perspective, I found the biggest risk is something that most business owners don't even think about. See, this makes sense though. If you own a business, your job is to run the business, right? You're thinking about your customers, you're thinking about your employees, payroll, sales, expenses, if you want to grow, how you need to grow, and maybe billions of other things. But you're not going to walk around every day thinking, what could my next insurance claim be? Could that insurance claim put me out of business? Could I not be covered for it? What's my biggest risk? I mean, if you're like me, you're thinking like that, but most of you probably aren't, which is probably a good thing. But the problem is, those small risks that you can quietly avoid or not think about, they very quickly turn into exceedingly expensive problems. Today, I want to talk about some of the risks I commonly see in businesses and what they overlook, why they overlook them, and most importantly, what, if anything, you can actually do about them. And the truth is, just about all of them, you can do something. If you didn't see my first video, my name is Kyle Bass. I spent more than a decade working in risk management, including loss control, and I've evaluated thousands of businesses across a huge spectrum of industries. I've been inside restaurants, apartment buildings, contractors' operations. I've dealt with manufacturing facilities, hotels, retail stores, auto businesses, healthcare operations, dams. You name it, I've done it, mostly. But one thing I've learned is this: risk usually looks obvious after something goes wrong. Before something goes wrong, it may even look normal. We've just always done it that way. This is how my daddy did it. This is how my granddaddy did it. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I'm not here to tell you how to run your business. But let's talk about some things that I would look in at if I walked into a small business today. So let's talk about what I just said, the we've always done it that way risk. One of the biggest warning signs in risk management is not necessarily a broken piece of equipment or an inherently dangerous operation. It's really a sentence that says, we've always done it that way. Again, my dad did it that way, my granddad did it that way, my mentor may have done it that way. But it's dangerous because businesses evolve. Everything in this world expands and contracts, but evolves, right? You're going to hire more employees or downsize. You buy vehicles, you add equipment, you start offering new services, you expand what you do. You may have started as a small contractor. You might have been doing some minor residential work, and this happens all the time. But 5 years later, or 5 years have gone by, and you're working on larger projects. Now you have subcontractors. Heck, now your subcontractors have subcontractors. But your safety procedures, your insurance, your contracts, the risk control contracts, excuse me, don't mind me, I don't have words today. But your contracts, your risk controls, they may still be designed for the company you were 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you may have been a one employee company. Today, you may be a 200 employee company. And we call that risk creep, right? Nothing dramatically changed overnight. You pretty much have lived with the evolution of your business. Think of it like this: you look in the mirror every day and you don't see much difference. Then all of a sudden, you see a photograph from 5 years ago. And you go, wow, I've changed a lot. Kind of the same thing with business, right? So you have to think, are we still protecting the business appropriately, right? You need to look at your business as if you're looking at it for the first time. You should ask yourself, What are you doing today you weren't doing even a year ago? Forget 5. What equipment have you added? What services have you added? Or perhaps even what services have you shifted away from? Are your employees driving more? Maybe your employees are driving for the first time for business. And that can include their own vehicle. Are you using subcontractors? Has your revenue increased substantially in some cases? Which, congratulations, that's a good problem to have. Have your contracts changed at all? If the business has changed, to be honest, your risk probably has. And if you've expanded, so has your risk. Let's talk about another thing that surprises a lot of people. Some of the most important, and I'll use this word lightly, dangerous risks are really incredibly boring, right? When you think of risk, and I'll touch on my emergency management background here. When I say risk or I say emergency background, emergency management, everyone always thinks fires, hurricanes, major accidents, things that make the news. That's not really all risk is. In fact, that's not even what the majority of risk is. Sure, that may have the highest viewership. That may even be some of the highest payouts because it affects such a large number of persons. But you don't think about something like this. What about a parking lot, right? There's a crack in your pavement. It's been getting worse. Winters have come and gone. Ice gets in there, expands, contracts. Employees walk it every day, right? Your customers walk over it. In fact, one of your customers stumbled the other day. Kind of had a good laugh, but they're fine. It's been there for months. In some cases, it's been there for years. But the next time that your customer tripped, they caught their foot. Now they fell. And when they fell, they're older, unfortunately. So they're not as resilient. This happened to my mother, actually. I'm not going to say the place it was at, but it was a commercial restaurant. She was walking out. The um, the concrete itself was separating. She walked over it, it gave way, she fell, and she broke her nose. Fortunately, it didn't shatter her jaw, but there have been cases where things like that happen as well. But the thing was, let's go back to this where someone catches their foot and they fall. Now you have a claim. Claim is an insurance. You're being sued, and that lawsuit can escalate quickly. And it's not just pavement, right? It's loose handrails, poor lighting, locked exits, it's extension cords. You're missing a fire extinguisher. You have wet floors. Your storage could be stacked too high. Yeah, storage stacked to the ceiling can be an insurance problem. It can be a risk management problem. More on that later. You have poor housekeeping. You have a driver with a bad driving history. And I've heard this before. He's my best driver. Yeah, he's also got 4 speeding tickets of 20 or above in the past 2 years. Sure, he gets everything done. He's reliable. Heck, maybe he's even a great guy. I'm not judging him for it. But he's also a ticking time bomb, or she. And that's the thing, right? Risk management, emergency management, even, it's not about finding these exciting problems. It's not on a movie where you go out and you see the really small crack in the engine that is going to blow up and the 747 is going to go down and 300 people are going to die, but you save the day. I mean, yeah, those things happen, sure. But that's not really what risk management is. It's about finding ordinary circumstances that can create extraordinary costs. So, what can we do about all this? There's a myriad of things. I'm going to go into a couple of them. But one of the simplest things a business can do is simply conduct a regular walkthrough. You don't want to wait for an insurance company to tell you something is wrong. Walk your property. Come at it from the point of view that you're a customer. Then come at it from the point of view that you're an employee. Look at it what an attorney might look at it after an accident. And when I say that, for those of you who obviously aren't attorneys, Look at it from a point of view of someone who's advocating for their client and how's it going to paint you. Because I'll be honest, it gets real messy real quick. It's not about how good a person you are. It's about how they're going to paint it in front of a judge and or jury if it goes that far. But do it this way a couple different times. You'll start to notice some very different things. The next thing I think we should talk about quickly is employees. And these are your biggest asset and unfortunately also your biggest risk. But they're often the best defense against a loss, right? But they're only as good as their training. Let's take driving. You might have companies who have an employees drive during the day. Perhaps they're driving company vehicles, or they could be driving their own vehicles for company purposes. What that looks like is you have an employee that you need to make a run to the grocery store for you. They're driving for company purposes. It's not regular commute. They're driving to and from various job sites you have. Maybe you have multiple locations that aren't job sites, they're just locations. And while they're on the clock, they're driving there. It's their personal vehicle, but that's driving for company purposes. So I had this, and the owner told me they're good drivers. Sure. How do you know? Are you checking their motor vehicle records? They may be one of the nicest people and great driving records, but did you know about the DUI? Yeah, they had a bad night. Did you know about their two speeding tickets? And I'm not talking two speeding tickets at, 35 and a 30. I'm talking about the 35 and a 15 school zone when kids are present. Talking about the red lights they ran, right? And then how do you handle that? How do you handle distracted driving? Do you have any training about it? If someone's driving for you once in a while, sure, maybe you don't need that. But if you got everyday drivers that are driving considerable distances, and that's, 25 to 50 miles um, in terms of radius as the crow flies, sure, you got some pretty high driving hazards. And let's also go into workplace safety. If an employee were to see a dangerous condition, for example, the employee walks out to the dumpster from a restaurant and they see that there's a large hole that's developed in your parking lot, who do they tell? Who do you tell? Do you own the place? You have a landlord? How do you go about that? If someone gets injured, are they all documented? Are near misses documented? And of course, near misses in an office may be different than near misses on a construction zone. And near misses in an office may not be something you need to keep as much track of as you do when you're on a construction zone, especially in a construction zone, because near misses eventually become incidents, right? But one of the things you want your employees thinking is if something doesn't look like right, excuse me, I should probably say something. Now, of course, you have to have some training around what exactly they need to say and when. You don't want every time that it looks like there's a tile that may not be perfectly clean, you tell. But you also want the employee to understand that, hey, I just walked over this tile inside and the tile cracked. Who am I talking to? Right? You want a healthy safety culture. And let me tell you, it doesn't require a giant corporate safety department. In fact, if you are a three employee business, right, and that third employee may be yourself as a W 2 as an owner, you don't want that. You don't need that. It's overkill. Sure, I tell everyone all the time, having written safety plans and accident investigation and all that is great. Yeah, it's great because it's going to show up, it's going to help in court. The truth is with ChatGPT, and we will cover that one day, you can create great safety plans very quickly. It's always nice to have. But you want your employees to be able to come to you and say, hey, what do we do about this? Maybe it's nothing, maybe it's everything. And that's one of the biggest things with employees. Now, let's say your employees are not employees, but they're contractors. And this is huge. I'm going to let you know right now. If you have a 1099, and a lot of people use 1099 employees, myself included, they're not technically an employee. They're a 1099 contractor. Now, there are laws in certain municipalities and states, etc., that you have to adhere to when a 1099 contractor becomes a W-2 employee. Don't run afoul of that. But that's not what I'm talking here. I'm talking you hire someone to work for you as a 1099. And this 1099, excuse the persons in the background that are driving. My office is right against the street where I am, and I didn't close my blinds all the way, so apologies if that has been distracting. But getting back to the 1099s, subcontractors, which are 1099s, are a huge potential liability. So a business owner, when they hire someone to perform a specific task, or maybe even someone that's not a W-2, you think automatically they're insured or covered. Maybe, maybe they're not. How do you know that? Did you verify their insurance? You verify an insurance by getting what's called a certificate of insurance. Certificate of insurance is a piece of paper that is like a declarations page, and it showcases you the insurance they have. It's normally per occurrence and total aggregate. You also want to know, does the coverage apply to the work they're performing for you? Then you want to talk about a contract. And by the way, with your certificate of insurance, you want to be listed when possible as an additional insured. Now, there's a couple different ways people go through this. Most of the time, when you're being referred to as making sure someone's an additional insured, and it's a little different in construction industry sometimes. An additional insured essentially says this: you are notified if anything about that certificate of insurance changes, whether they lose their insurance, change their insurance, something like that. You're simply notified. You can't make the changes. You're just notified so you don't get blindsided. If they give you a COI and then all of a sudden something happens and they don't have insurance, or they don't have the insurance you thought they had. Now let's talk about the contract. Does the contract explain exactly who's responsible? And this becomes more important as the business grows, right? You may have been doing everything yourself. Now you're subcontracting portions or perhaps all of the work. That's great. That really is. But you've also introduced another organization into the risk environment. See, here's really the key I'm going to look at. You can outsource your work. This is America. We're great at that. You can't always outsource the consequences. Again, this is America. We are great at outsourcing things. We're not always great at managing that outsource and the risk it provides to us. If something goes badly wrong on your project, your company can still end up getting involved. This is why contracts and insurance verification matter. And the truth is, if something goes wrong on a project, you are likely going to be sued. The difference is, with proper certificates of insurance to verify they have insurance and proper contracts, you'll most likely be dismissed from the lawsuit. There are many horror stories where people who have not gotten certificates of insurance or hired people who weren't insured, and it went very badly. I'm going to give you one last thing before I move on. Actually, you know what? Let's go a little further into the risk that isn't insured, and then we'll talk about that. Right? A lot of times business owners think, I'm insured, I'm protected. And of course, insurance is important. There is discussion going on within our country about how important insurance is. I would venture to say it's very important. I'd venture to say some of the actors within the insurance industry have not always acted properly, and that's unfortunate. And that's a discussion for another day. But insurance is incredibly important. I put it like this to someone one day. I was doing an inspection with them, and they told me, hey, I just paid the insurance company 50 grand. Why do I need to give a crap about any of this? Well, the truth was they were insured for $30 million. So, in the event that something happened that day, 2 days after paying the $50,000, they would get the majority of their premium back on a prorated basis, and they'd be paid out for up to 30 million. Most of us don't have that money lying around. That is where insurance, in my opinion, is necessary. Yeah, there are a lot of evils in the insurance industry. 100% agree with you. But fundamentally itself, the risk transfer is something that I believe help keeps our business and our economies, our businesses and our economies running. And when executed properly, risk transfer is just that. That's what insurance is. You transfer your risk. I am transferring the risk that in the event of a motor vehicle accident with my personal vehicle, you are going to cover me for liability and property damages up to what I've agreed to. And I will pay you a certain amount of money based on that. That is pure risk transfer. That's what insurance is. Again, we can get into something else another day about how there's things that have problems. And there are many problems within the industry, just like there's many problems in society in the world. But a lot of people think I have insurance and protected. As I said, insurance is your way of financing a risk, but you're never going to prevent the accident with insurance. It's simply transferring the risk. Now, not every business problem, by the way, is necessarily insured. Unfortunately, a lot of people have learned that lately as catastrophes have gone up. You can think also about your reputation in addition to what might be a denied claim. Maybe you have a key employee that's injured or leaves. You might lose your largest customer because of not managing risk. Or maybe you have managed your risk, but a supplier you have shuts down. How many suppliers do you have? Is your suppliers, are they niche? If they are, do you have anyone else you can get them from? How quickly will that take? Do you have a business continuity plan? Let's talk about your computer systems going offline. Maybe it's a cyber attack. Maybe it's a loss of electricity. Maybe the provider for your internet has a problem. A bunch of things can cause that. Let's talk about a major piece of equipment. You have one major piece of equipment, maybe it's worth $200,000, and that piece of equipment breaks down. Farmers deal with this all the time. How quickly can you replace it? How quickly can it be worked on? How long can you go without? Truth is, most businesses can't even go a day without it, myself included. And I don't even use specialized equipment outside of a laptop. But I learned real quick I didn't have a backup laptop, and my laptop died. I had a couple days of no productivity. That hurt. Then we talk about disasters. Hurricane Helene hit where I was. I'm located in South Carolina. Fortunately, for the most part, our property was okay. I lost all my food, sure. Had a couple things here and there, but I was nowhere near the devastation that hit Western North Carolina. Couldn't even fathom it. Well, I can because of my background, but I think you get my point. But I didn't have cell phone service, electricity, any connection to the outside world outside of radio for 3 days. I couldn't do any of my work. Some of my clients that were in other areas of the country just thought I was standing them up. They didn't know where I was having a national disaster or a major disaster that turned out to be national. Usually I'd use my cell phone, but the cell phones went down. So disaster can make your building inaccessible or even remote work improper, impossible. Excuse me, impossible. Again, words. I'll get there. And the last thing is, even when insurance ultimately responds to your loss and they do it properly and you're covered, your business still has to survive that disruption. So I'm going to ask you now, if your business couldn't operate tomorrow, what would you do? How would your employees communicate with you? How would you contact customers? Is your data backed up? If so, where is it? How do you access it? Who has the authority to make decisions? Who are your vendors that are absolutely critical to you, your suppliers and your vendors? How long could your company survive without normal operations? And I'll take that question a step further. How long could you operate even knowing you're going to get that money back in a month or two, maybe sooner when the insurance company responds. Could you operate that month or two without that income? Or would you fold before you're paid? See, you don't need a 100-page emergency plan. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're a 5,000 employee company that's doing chemicals, you do. All right. So don't take that as carte blanche. And I'm sure you won't. But if you're a 5-person, 5-employee company, you don't need a 100-page emergency plan. You simply don't. But you do need to start. And you start with page 1. What I would recommend to you is write down the 5 things your business absolutely needs to function. And what would you do if one of them disappeared tomorrow? By the way, you know what you just did? My job. That's called risk management. Now, this brings me back to the question I asked at the beginning. What is the biggest risk facing your business? See, I can't answer that without knowing your business. And frankly, anyone who immediately gives you an answer without understanding your operations, at best, is guessing. At worst, well, we won't go into it. See, a roofer is not going to have the same risks as a restaurant. Your employees are not going to fall off a roof if you're in a restaurant. And your employees are unlikely to get burned with frying oil if you're a roofer. Again, there are exceptions to every rule, but you understand my point. An apartment complex does not have the same risks as a trucking company. See, a good risk manager, or good risk management in general, starts with understanding their operations. But here's the one mistake I've seen, and it's universal, myself included, I've made it. Assuming that because something hasn't happened yet, it won't happen. I've seen businesses operating in the same conditions for years, decades, without a problem. That doesn't mean your condition is safe. You may have simply been fortunate. Maybe a miracle has been taking place. Maybe you just simply haven't hit the tipping point yet. Either way, the goal of risk management is not to eliminate every risk. See, this is impossible. The very fact that you breathe means there's risk. You could breathe something in that has nothing to do with you and it could end you. I mean, you hear about these fungal storms coming across the country right now, which if you don't know what they are, Google them because I'm not perfectly versed on them. But the real goal of risk management is to understand your risks, decide which ones matter the most, and take reasonable steps to reduce them. So, for example, if you're running a um, six-unit apartment complex, sure, you can prepare for a nuclear strike. And during the Cold War, that was something you really needed to do. And maybe as tensions heat up, you do now. But the truth is, there are other more pressing risks that are going to deal with than Russia deciding to launch a bomb. The other part of that equation is if Russia does do that, what is reliably within your control? That's something else to take into mind with risk management. If there's something that's so completely out of your control, take the steps you can to mitigate it, but understand that risk is inherent. So, again, I ask you, with your operations as a business owner, what is your biggest risk? And that's going to be personal to your business. And what are the reasonable steps you can take to reduce them? I'm going to close with this, and I'm going to challenge every business owner watching this to do it this week. Take 20 minutes, walk through your business, truly walk through it. Don't answer emails, don't take calls, don't be distracted. Just look and ask yourself, what could hurt somebody? What could damage the business? What could stop us from operating? What am I assuming is okay? simply because we've never had an issue with it. And you know what it is. You know that pile of housekeeping or that pile that you have in the back in your restaurant that anytime anyone walks by, you get scared that that rack is going to fall. It hasn't fallen in years. That doesn't mean it's not going to. But after everything I've said, write down the top three things that you find. You just performed a basic risk assessment. And that's really what I want this channel to be about. I don't want this to be about fear. I'm not going to tell you that everything is dangerous. Right? There's risk in everything. There's risk in getting out of bed. But it's about understanding the risk so you can make better decisions, whether that's in business, leadership, preparedness, or just simply everyday life. It's the kind of conversation, if this kind of conversation interests you, again, words, try this again. If this kind of conversation interests you, subscribe and stick around. In the next video, I'm going to talk about 5 insurance mistakes that can seriously hurt and in some cases potentially bankrupt a small business. Again, I'm Kyle Bass. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.